Welcome to Casual Watch Talk, the podcast from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel. Join us as we talk everything watches, from watch collecting, the latest horology news and interviews. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe on your favourite podcast app. Let's dive into the show. Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 19 of Casual Watch Talk. I'm joined again by my co-host Kris. How have you been, Kris?
Hey Sam, good evening.
We are going to switch it up a little bit this week because we've got a very interesting interview. We're going to be joined by Ryan and Raegan from Vaer Watches. Now, if anyone's familiar with my channel, you'll know that I've covered Vaer quite a few times. Really interesting pair of guys. They originally assembled the watches in LA. You're going to learn all about Microbrands, how they go through their design processes. We always like to start these shows with Kris. What have you been wearing this week?
All right, this week, back to the Bell & Ross Zin 103 chronograph. Had a great discussion with a bunch of our folks over on the Facebook group. Let me give a quick shout out to, let's see. Oh, sorry. It was Lee and Jeff were over there. We were talking about Bell & Ross and Zin and fixing and things. So if you haven't already, definitely join us over there on the Facebook group, Casual Watch Talk. Absolutely.
And yeah, a shout out to Jeffrey. He's was congratulating on me on being at nearly 10,000 subs on my YouTube channel. And I swear, and I need to go back and look in the archives, but I'm sure Jeffrey was like in the first 10. Like, so he's stuck with me for the best part of 4 years.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, it always offers a lot of good feedback and positive encouragement. So anyway, what's been your watch obsession this week? So we've still been in our stay-at-home orders, and I've certainly been looking at a lot of watches.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, speaking of stay-at-home, my watch obsession this week is my buddy Sam left a package on my door a couple days ago that had the Ultimate Turtle in it, and my obsession has been figuring out kind of what was up with it. It was losing a little bit of time, something to take a look at, but got it on the time grapher after, and by the way, I had no problem just immediately dunking it in soapy water, so your watch is clean now. And put it on the time grapher, and looks like the seconds hand is just ever so slightly dragging on the crystal, which is something that Seiko Modders, when you deal with when you change the movement in the crystal, which this watch has got a whole bunch of different stuff on it. And Sam's petrified of me touching the hands, but I can report no issues, and I got it dialed in and running in tip-top shape.
Oh, great. And yeah, thanks for doing that, Kris. This Ultimate Turtle has been quite the project, but it's been very rewarding because I still do love that watch. But so I've been wearing, again, my little titanium Citizen. I've really become, and we'll talk about this later, but I've really become fond of quartz again, and I don't know where that's coming from.
And we mentioned it the last couple of times on the podcast. Maybe it's the nature of grab and go, and just having something that is going to be reliable and ready to wear.
Yeah, absolutely. And my watch obsession this week, and I think it's as a result of last week's podcast, is I can't stop looking at that 42 millimeter new blue Breitling Super Ocean. It's captivating.
I mean, the 42 does it.
Yeah.
If I didn't already have, it's definitely, it's very nice. It's very nice. And I with the Super Ocean 2, that the big thing that they did was they changed, and if you guys haven't seen a picture of it, they had all the Arabic numerals, 1 through 12, and then they had the little 24. They had just the previous version, I think 2 years ago, it just had so much information on the dial, and just so much going on. And I think Breitling listened to their customers, their feedback, which is, certainly we'll discuss, is hard to do for these larger conglomeration, giant brands. And I think they listened, and they took a whole bunch of text off the dial, cleaned it up, Breitling logo, chronometer, simple layout. I think it looks the business. It's great.
Okay, everyone, we're going to pause early on and have our break early, and then when we come back, we're going to be joined by Ryan and Raegan from Vaer Watches. Hi guys, welcome back. Well, for our second part of the segment, we are very lucky to be interviewing Ryan and Raegan from Vaer Watches. I've been reviewing Vaer Watches. I just looked since 2018, and that was March, so that was nearly 2 years ago. That very early model that you did, that quartz model, which impressed me. And then the models have just got more and more refined over time, including the addition to the autos, which I think was probably your most requested from the fans. So thank you both for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. We appreciate it. It's nice to be finally doing this interview. I know we've now been connected for years, which is pretty awesome. So we're happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be on, and yeah, it's fantastic, Sam, as well, because you caught us right at the beginning of the journey in many ways. That 2018 model was something we were proud of. So it was our first real model that we were sending out to reviewers. But yeah, hopefully we only have good things to come, and hopefully we can keep doing this.
For listeners that aren't familiar with the brand, I guess I'd love to hear your guys' version of the background, how you got started, etc. What excited you about watches?
Yeah, I'll get that started. So Reagan and I worked together at a digital marketing company back in 2015. I specifically have always been interested in watches. You know, I had G-Shocks growing up, Seikos. I had a little stint where I was buying and selling watches on eBay and that sort of thing, and that went quiet. And then in 2015, started kind of researching the watch industry and seeing opportunity to make pretty decent quality watches at an affordable price. So basically, right when the idea struck, Reagan was again on my team at that startup, and grabbed him, and we kind of took off from there. It was just, designing and looking at new designs, and the whole path together, from that point in 2015.
One of the things that definitely strikes me, Ryan, is your marketing is excellent. So I was going to ask this question, and I'm glad you sort of opened with that. My hunch was that. So very cool. Looking at your site, looking at the way you your photos, your videos, your stuff, definitely that clean image focused. That's super important for any brand to rise above.
People are often surprised because I mean we're proud obviously of the stuff we put out there, the website, the video, the content in general. But I think a lot of people are surprised when they realize, or when they do learn, that the team is just Ryan and myself. So we are Microbrand, of course. But we've always taken, that's always been a top priority. And, I think that's common. You can use branding to try and make yourself look bigger than you are. Or at least just, it can be a real, it can be an advantage to kind of help gain trust because, hopefully in the world of watches, when it comes to making a purchase, strong presentation, even on an online website or the brand message, that helps kind of communicate that, hey, these guys probably have their head on their shoulders when it comes to design decisions, when it comes to industrial design and product design. And that I think is just and all of the big brands, of course, do both well. You can't, Rolex does product design incredibly well, but the brand is impeccable. And those two things live kind of symbiotically in a nice way. Yeah.
So important when you're first starting out and you have your website and you want to make it so that process, your customers are trusting that process, that you didn't skimp on anything, and that you don't look like some fly by night organization. You need to sort of back that up in the same way that I think you guys have really backed it up with your products. And Sam and I will definitely go into a little bit more of that.
Sure. And I mean the other thing too is like we're a 2-person company now, and we're a micro brand, of course, but I think just like a lot of the smaller American brands and either brands outside the United States as well, at our stage is, we have big ambitions. And so one reality of that is there are brands in the community that, that do operate with very basic websites. And then they don't really rely on that model because, they go to trade shows or they go, and a lot of their sales are in person or whatever it may be. Obviously, that's a great model. You can be very successful and have a really, really comfortable lifestyle doing that. But you can't scale that infinitely, and you can't. There's only so large that you can make that. Where we always had this vision of a really big story, and of course in this day and age, is particularly with our resources and only 2 people, that means being able to sell online effectively. And so that is why we've always invested in that. So.
I remember the first questions that I asked you was that incredible advert you did with the spear fisherman, and I was asking you about it, and you were like, "Oh yeah, there was like our 2 friends that we videoed." It was I think that was one of the best watch adverts I'd ever seen on social media, because this is what amazes me about the way that you guys embraced social media marketing. You do it better than certainly Seiko or some of the bigger brands. Have you ever sort of thought about or discussed between yourselves why the big brands are just so awful really at social media marketing?
We talk about it. I mean, obviously Seiko is like the cornerstone for affordable quality, just like craftsmanship, right? Incredible, beautiful watches, but they have almost zero marketing. I think, a lot of it is maybe complacency. They've already established footholds in the market. They have a certain amount of popularity and they have a certain amount of reputation that just exists. And, there's not really a reason for them to push social. I think, especially listening to the last few of your podcasts, as times get more challenging and as micro brands start to take more market share, I think some of those legacy brands they're just going to have to do social. They're going to have to hire, new and build new teams to start to take back that market share, as, because brands like us didn't really exist 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
And I think it's also just the nature. It has nothing to do with, Seiko. In many cases, it's just the nature of organizations, the nature of bureaucracies. And, Ryan and I have worked at tech companies of different sizes, and typically, the bigger the company gets, the less ability the less meaning that an individual passion necessarily can have on a campaign or anything else, because, it's a collective effort. Obviously, having a really passionate CEO or a great CMO or marketing or even a great agency, those can help. But you can never replace the value of just one person alone in their garage. And if you really have a story to tell, or if you're a filmmaker or whatever else, you can't really translate that into an organization of 50 people, let alone 500 or 5,000 people. Unfortunately, there's just not a mechanism to make that a reality. And that's a small advantage that micro brands and companies like us have, is that, if we want to do it, we can do it. If we think it's cool, that's about the only, that's like the boardroom meeting is between Ryan and I being like, let's go ahead and do it. Yeah.
Your flexibility, it's perfect. When you're a small company, that flexibility, you just have to just attack that, because like you said, Seiko making these large decisions. Now, one of the decisions that you guys went back. So you went back after your first campaign and you redesigned your watches. You spent 10 months redesigning the fit, the finish, the various pieces. How was that process?
We want to make the watch as good as possible. So a really intriguing part of that process, and part of what triggered that process, I actually don't know if it was like a chicken and egg thing, but bringing assembly to the US was massive, because we, instead of having your manufacturers and assembly teams overseas, you're now we're literally bringing batches of watches to our assembly teams. And they're complaining to us if there's problems, or if there's things that make assembly difficult, or if there's things that are going to fail. And so that triggered a lot of our improvements. And then from an aesthetic perspective, and I'll let Reagan speak more to it, I know a huge step for us was going from off-the-shelf cases to our current case, which we're incredibly proud of. It's really beautiful and really refined. But yeah, I mean, for us, it's just, even with our existing watches, we're more happy than ever. But, we have a batch that's upcoming. Everything's done in batches for us. So we do batches generally every 2 to 3 months. But our upcoming batch, even on watches that are fantastic, they're still getting changes. They're still getting tweaks to the hands, tweaks to the loom, some technical tweaks as well. Changing case structure to be basically to have more longevity, things that are going to last. But it's really just, if our assembly team tells us something, or, Reagan will hit me up and say, I don't like the way that the text appears on the dial. And we'll have a discussion about it and say, oh, we could do it better. And so we just continue to make changes.
Yeah, well, just on that the instance of the 10-month redesign, one of the, I think, stepping off points, and actually the first watch that Sam, that you reviewed, that was our kind of our V2 case. And the big distinguishing factor in that is breaking away from, Ryan mentioned the off-the-shelf cases. And often designation of that, and there are great brands. There are multi-million-dollar micro brands that are still using more or less off-the-shelf cases. It's kind of what you would call a sandwich case design, where it's more or less just metal rings, and then they're pressed together, and they're typically all at a 90 degree angle. It's functional. It more or less works, and it can be, you know, unnoticeable to 90% of consumers. But what you like for our current case, we have this beautiful rounding curvature, this beautiful brushed finish, highlight chamfering along the lugs, things that you would see on, you know, that you would maybe expect on a $3,000 case. We're trying to offer that same case finishing, which is still just steel, at the $150 price point. So that was like a really, really big component of it. And really, it's just a struggle with any type of industrial design. There are some factories most factories cannot do that. They don't have the capacity. And however, you can fly over there, you can go on Alibaba, you can search, and, you know, and in many cases, it can be a challenge because as a micro brand, you may be, you know, $1 million into revenue, and you be tied to this case that you're working on. But there's a challenge of, like, you know, this factory can only take it to 7 out of 10. And what do you do at that point? We were lucky enough, or, you know, just as things played out, we were comfortable with our case. We had already sold a few thousand of our initial design, but we had that opportunity to go back to the drawing board, work with what we think is one of the best case manufacturers in the world, and really pump out something that, you know, could grow us into, you know, a next level brand.
One of the really interesting things as well is you really embraced Kickstarter, I think, quite early on. And I remember that a lot of people were asking you about a mechanical watch, and you did produce that on Kickstarter, and you just blew that target out of the water. I can't imagine what your original target was. I got a feeling it was around the sort of $20,000 to $30,000 mark, but you ended up doing north of 200K, 223 nearly. I mean, did that surprise you guys?
Yeah. I mean, Reagan and I, the night we launched it, we were, you know, it was like we had the early release at midnight, and we're sitting in the room and just saw the counter clicking up. And I think, Reagan, what was it, in the first hour? It was like $80,000 or something ridiculous. We couldn't believe it. Like, we were so excited. You know, we had a good feeling about it because we surveyed people so heavily. We involved all the consumers into the process really deeply, and allowed them to help with the design. So we knew there were going to be people coming out, but the numbers were absolutely incredible. I mean, it was really, really cool to see a showing of people that were that excited about the watches. And then, you know, forward fast, it's been, I guess, 8 months, 10 months, and now all these consumers have their watches on their wrists, and they're very happy about them. So it was a very incredible process.
Yeah, it's always a surprise in the sense that we're in kind of you could say maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was the initial era of, you know, selling things online, and that's where the movements and the Daniel Wellingtons had success with that. Now I think we're in a better and more interesting phase, and I think what will be a more long-term phase is, what is it like to sell watches or anything online where you have a direct communication and back and forth with the people that are buying? It's much more organic, but it really takes you, even though we're an online company, it takes you back to 100 years ago when you have the local shop on Main Street, and you know every one of your customers by name, and you have a kind of a neighborly relationship with them. That's I mean, it's new to us. It's new to a lot of brands because, you know, we don't know what to expect, and we're always continuously surprised. Like, does anyone actually care that much to do this? And to use a small example, like, Ryan and I are going to try to do our first live stream. We did a live stream 2 weeks ago with Worn and Wound, and it went well, and we thought it was a cool format. And we're going to try our first live stream on this Friday. But we don't know. We don't know if 5 people will show up to listen. Maybe 500 will. So it's the same thing with the Kickstarter. Is like, we're always surprised when people care as much as they do, but it's obviously a very rewarding thing when you actually see that they're interested. So.
Yeah, it's been an interesting renaissance of the US watchmaking, really, because it was decimated in the 70s with the quartz crisis. And for you guys, I think you're about an hour and 20 minutes north of Kris and I, not that we live together, but and so it's interesting to think of a watch being assembled that close now, whereas you couldn't say that. What do you think, Kris? Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that just wasn't a...
Yeah.
Now, Sam, one note, we have to we do actually do our assembly now in Arizona, so it's no longer in Los
Oh,
Angeles.
okay.
Oh.
Little caveat.
Yeah, little caveat. And I, basically, we had individual assembly technicians that we were working with in LA and doing everything very batch based, and we found a really great partner in Arizona that's more of a facility, a factory. And they're training young watch technicians and have a really incredible lead technician. They've been instrumental in our ability to scale assembly operations. That was one of the biggest bottlenecks, was especially with the more affordable quartz watches. I know a lot of the other great micro brands out there also do assembly in the US, but that's on their more, $500, $600, $700 automatic watches. It's just lower volume. With the quartz watches, getting that volume with those individual technicians was really, really challenging. Definitely one of our biggest challenges.
And then it's a nature of scale as well, in the sense that we started off without much like money or ability to do it. So we just went out to local watch shops, local techs, and we're like, hey, can you assemble 100 watches at a time, 200 watches at a time? That was a band-aid solution. As we scale, obviously, even what we're doing right now and outsourcing to the team in Arizona, that's a band-aid solution, in the sense that real security as we scale would be to bring it back in-house, bring it back to Los Angeles, have our own tech teams, but we don't have the resources to do that yet. So it's a growing cycle, but yeah, that would be the ideal, is whether it's a decade or now, it's like Vaer is what Hamilton once was in Lancaster. We're like that in Los Angeles.
And you guys switched from quartz to mechanical, so you had some other, there's some technical ability that is there as well. You're not necessarily the same person assembling putting a quartz watch together, putting the hands on a quartz, popping it in, etc., versus the tech that's needed to handle your Miyota movements, your automatic.
Yeah, 100%. Making sure that timing's accurate, and just you want a more capable, I guess, official or formal operation for that, and it's been super valuable. And we've kept our relationships with our techs that we worked with over the years. It's pretty cool. We know a lot of watch technicians in LA, some super talented, and some that we still work with. We'll go show them a new design and get feedback, or work with them on repairs of existing watches. So it's a cool community of people, and we're really happy to be putting some of our revenue towards that industry and those people. The supply chain is just really, really intriguing the deeper you go into it. Like I know you guys mentioned there's the Weisses, who are doing almost everything actually in-house. There's Vero, there's Vortec. Those are some other US brands that are making cases, making dials. Most of the movements are still sourced elsewhere, but regardless, they're actually building those components. And it's, the more we learn about all of these big legacy brands that are also, they're not manufacturing cases in-house. Some are. And when we find out a brand is manufacturing cases, dials, hands in-house, it's incredibly impressive, and it's incredibly respectable, because it's not easy to do at all. It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, one thing that I would add in, and it's just a kind of an interesting caveat to this whole discussion of the American assembly, American made, is you could say it's an advantage or a disadvantage, but in the United States, just with trade regulation, the FCC never, or FTC actually, sorry, Federal Trade Commission, never gave a specific percentage number of component value that is equivalent to a US made or made in USA. So essentially it's just all or almost all, which is rare. Most countries have a strict percentage number, which you can then build up to or work around. So I think hopefully, and I don't know if this will ever happen, but I think it would be in the best interest of, American, like brands like us, whether in watch industry or otherwise, to lobby or to put pressure on the government to say, hey, just give us a number, we'll try our best to get it there. Because the real challenge is it 99%? Is it 100%? 199 is really, really challenging. But if it's, it's 60%, like in Swiss, if it's whatever that number may be, simply setting it, say 75%, there's a path forward for brands. And then consumers also know or have a stronger sense of that's actually, that's what that actually represents, where there's obviously brands like Shinola that can kind of work around and use kind of misconceptions or strange phrasing on their marketing to help have people believe one thing where the actual component sourcing is another. So that would be one little caveat, is I think American watch brands would benefit from having that number laid out.
While we're kind of talking a little inside baseball, if you can discuss, what are you, when your customers, are your customers pushing you towards that? Are you getting the feedback from your customers that, hey, this is the direction we want to go, and not just from a sort of a marketing standpoint, but just like, what are maybe some of the differences that you see with your Swiss automatics that you offer, your Miyota movements that you offer, et cetera, et cetera? Like, what are people drawn to there?
So I can just because I have the survey in front of me, because this is a great question and something that we just ran a survey last week, because we're in the process of, just like we had launched the automatic last year, we're in the process of launching our first dive watch this year, which we're really excited about. So we ran a survey to about 3,000 people. So just sent it as an email and said, hey, if you have a few minutes, take it. It was fantastic. We had 3,000 people that took time. I think the average completion time was around 8 minutes. It's a type form survey. And there was about 18 questions, and really awesome, and a lot of long form feedback. And really, again, just another example of kind of a back and forth between customers. And actually, I think 60% of people who filled out the survey don't even own a Vaer watch, which is cool because it shows that, you know, we may not have won their trust yet, but they're watching us closely and say, if these guys pull this off, then maybe I'll give them a chance. So that's kind of the dynamic. But on that specific question, we had that. For those at least who had purchased a Vaer watch, we asked what would be the biggest selling point, or what was the biggest selling point. Number one was design and aesthetics at 37%. Number two was affordability value at 31%. And number three was US assembly at 15%. Beyond that, number four, outdoor functionality, 10%, and then 5 was other. So you can see like 15% of our customers or people who have bought the watch, USA assembly was the number one priority. That gives you one perspective that's really important to, you know, that's a sizable like portion of the audience, but there's obviously 85% who care about, like, don't prioritize that. So that's kind of a neat breakdown of.
Interesting.
Yeah. We thought it was interesting.
On that note, another question we asked and have asked for the past Kickstarters, as well as, you know, would you prefer a Swiss made? Because we also offer Swiss made automatics. Would you prefer a Swiss made or a USA assembled? Not only do the USA assembled options win out, now the USA assembled we do with Miyota, so it's more affordable, but that option wins out. And in addition, in the freeform commentary, we get a ton of people who would actually like an ETA or a Swiss made movement, but still assembled in the US. So granted, you know, our audience, we've, over the past years, because of our American assembly and because of the, you know, American nature of our brand, we've drawn an audience that already is inclined to be more interested in that. We definitely get people out there who are like, why would you put American assembly on the dial? Or I couldn't care less. But a lot of people really care. And a lot of people want more than, more than just American assembly. You know, we get comments, and I have canned responses ready to go, because you get people on the Facebook comments, why just assembled? Why not made in USA? And as Reagan was saying, it's nearly impossible to actually make a made in USA watch, just because of there's no movements in the US unless you're doing it in-house movement.
Sam and I were talking that either the last one or the previous, just that, where that maybe they make the machinery here, but as far as a manufacturing component, it's not available. So interesting.
Yeah.
And we also see within the universe of, you know, the watch world, we see ourselves as kind of a design-oriented brand. We lean a little bit into that rugged outdoorsy vibe, but like brands like Baltic or Fair or Nomos being a bit bigger, these are kind of very design-centric or very clean. I don't know how you guys would describe them, but those are the brands that we really admire, and none of those are American brands. So that's kind of where we see as an opportunity, is our Americanness, our being based in California here, is a way of helping distinguish us from, you know, someone who's considering those brands. And hopefully, maybe if they're an American buyer, that American assembly is the piece that maybe draws them towards us. So
I just saw the Dirty Dozen Swiss automatic for the first time. That is a very, very cool watch. We had talked about it on the podcast a bunch about the old Dirty Dozen watches, and your comparison in many cases to Hamilton and other brands, Marathon, Leico, et cetera, some that you mentioned. Clean design, and you talk about those canned responses. Someone asked about the different movement with the small seconds, and you're like, yes, it's a different movement. It has to be. It's literally mechanically different. It has different gears in it, etc. So what have you guys got coming down the pipeline?
We're actually working on a second iteration of that watch, which we're pretty excited about. So we did a limited release of that watch. We made 250 pieces total. It has the ETA 2895, which is rare, expensive. It's hard to get, as with all ETA movements now. So we're working on a still Swiss made. We're going to drop it to 38 millimeters to be a bit closer to the originals, which were 35 to 37. And we're going to make it hand wound. So we're super excited about that release. That will be sometime in the summer. So that's going to be our
and a similar price point.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very close price point. It actually might be a little bit affordable being the hand wound. We're shooting to use a ETA 7001. It's actually in a Stoa, and there's a Nomos that used to use it. The biggest release upcoming is going to be our dive watch line. And that's what we just surveyed about. So that'll be an automatic watch. We've been working on it for, I guess years. As a watch brand owner, you kind of can only wear your watches. And so we've been wearing field watches for years now. And we've both been insanely excited to get the opportunity to wear a dive watch that's hard.
Right. Because you're both surfer, diver, et cetera. So in the water.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll let Reagan elaborate on the feature set and kind of design, appearance, and aesthetic.
Well, we feel like we're always moving closer to that dream watch, but we're doing it with, I think I would describe it as like extreme caution. Because, we started the company, Ryan and I, with our life savings. It's still like growing in that way. And when we rely on, the support of our customers, and we can't afford to have an unsuccessful launch. It's as simple as that. Every watch we release has been a huge success, and we need to continue that path for years to come, which is why we're careful with it. But it's funny if you compare the watch that Sam reviewed back in 2018, I believe it was just a minimalist, our classic design, which is very, very simple. But it's something that, even people who don't care about watches, they're just like, that's a clean, beautiful watch. I can wear that. Now we're getting into the complexities of, these, retro style divers and, sapphire case wagon ETAs and all of these really in-depth things, which are expensive for us to build, but they also represent risk. And even the thing about the Dirty Dozen is, we initially offered it in the 40 millimeter, which is kind of that safe zone of sizing, and with an automatic, which is more popular probably. But now that was such a success, we can actually go back and create an even more authentic, slightly smaller, whether that's the 36, 38, and a manual wound, something that is like true to shape and form of those original World War II models. And we can do that now with the confidence that people loved the 40 millimeter. Now let's give them something that's even more purist. So for us, we're moving on a spectrum. All of our watches are hopefully going to improve over time. And we're hopefully, we feel like we're just in many ways scratching the surface of, we're excited to be offering a 36 millimeter. Did we have the confidence to launch a 36 before we launched our field watch or automatic? No. But now that we're ready for that, we're excited to get into 36s. We're excited to get into all of the, the GMTs, everything else. What we do know from all of our surveying is that to this day, the dive watch is the most popular. Like everything we've seen, that's what people want the most. There are obviously a lot of micro brands that only sell dive watches, and like from what we've seen, that's a pretty sound economic decision. So we're really excited to get in that space and hopefully, show what we can do in it, and hopefully that wins new customers, and it will hopefully be, a springboard for even more, like for Chrono, for more pieces that we're just dreaming of right now.
I see this with wineries. I see this with car manufacturers where they're like, okay, well, we need to make an SUV, we need to make a van, we need to make a truck, we need to make a car. And you're like, guys, what are you good at? What have you worked to figure out? And you kind of lose that. Whereas, you guys are taking one foot at a time, one step at a time, kind of moving into it. You've got some dial designs that all look amazing, fun, and sort of, that you're working with the community on. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that kind of what we think ties obviously affordability is a big piece, is like, when you look back at what a Rolex Submariner cost relative to like adjusted inflation back in 1952, or the cost of a Dirty Dozen, it was a military watch. It was like the government was buying these for soldiers. So it's funny when you see some of the original Dirty Dozen brands do a special edition re-release but it's $4,000. And you're like, we kind of lost the everyman spirit of it. So that's what our goal is, just to build a watch. I mean, obviously a $700-800 watch is very expensive, but our hope is like, we still hope that's an affordable watch given the value, given that it has an ETA. So like that, our premise is like, let's make the affordable version of the watch everyone's dreaming of. And even with the diver, we like, people love the Rolex Mil Sub, but yeah, good luck. They're $100,000 if you can afford that. And for other people, it's a Grail watch. So why not do an homage to that? Or let's pull why do people love the Mil Sub? What is it about it that's so exciting? And let's take that as an influence that's kind of our thinking.
Yeah. So regarding our upcoming dive watch, incredibly excited about the release. We just ran surveys, and so we gathered a ton of really valuable data. We have some core features that we've sort of had in the back of our minds for a while and are now confirmed. So it's going to be 39 millimeter diameter with a 40 millimeter bezel. We're going to do a ceramic bezel. We were debating between sapphire and ceramic, and after quite a bit of discussion with some watch industry folks and a lot of forum research, we're going to go with ceramic. It'll have a 200 meter water resistance. So again, also kind of debated 200 versus 300 meters. And we really established that 200 meters is more than enough for any practical usage in a diver. And it enables us to keep thickness down, which we're excited about. It will have a double dome sapphire crystal. We're going to have 5 dial variations. So Reagan produced some pretty incredible dials, and we sort of modified them and developed them over the past few months. So we're really excited for those. Definitely a ton of lume in everything. I know that's like beyond anything else. Lume's definitely one of the biggest points of.
And I think you guys got, your early field watch, people were like, the lume kind of thing, but it's a field watch, whereas diver, yeah, it's got to have lume. It's got to have all the lume.
Yeah. So we're going to pump it full of super lume. It'll be mixed styles of lume. We're still trying to determine the exact, not grade, but the exact, BGW9 versus C3 versus
composition.
We're looking at, yeah, exactly. The exact composition. Thank you. But a ton of lume, as much volume of lume as possible. Some will have applied indices. Some will be painted directly on. So that's.
So these 5 designs that you surveyed, these are on the table, or you are going to have these 5 out?
We're intending to have all 5. So,
wow.
We're talking with our manufacturers now, and this might be something we need to talk with you guys more in depth offline. It's intriguing. We really beautiful dial designs that we're excited about, that people were pretty balanced on their opinions about. And our perception is, we can produce a compatible case and compatible feature set. Dials are one of the easier components to make in a watch. And with our stateside assembly, it's pretty easy to just create batches of watches with different dials. We like to make our customers happy. And if there are hundreds of people intrigued in each dial, and we personally enjoy each dial and think each dial is beautiful in its own way, then why not produce it? And they'll still be within the same line of watches, but they'll have, each their own unique identity.
One thing that I've always found interesting about the brand is you started off very early on outdoors watch, etc. And there's a lot of companies that have outdoor sports watch, surf watches, but I think from memory you might be the only one that have ever specifically put in their warranty instructions that as long as the crown is sealed on there, we will cover for like water ingress into the watch, which can't think of even some of the major brands won't do that, I don't think.
I mean, I think that's just something it really goes in line what I was mentioning earlier with this idea of the way watches were built 50 years ago, 100 years ago as tools. It's something that we've really moved away from, that a dive watch is more of a status symbol than a functional item. That's fine. I understand why, you buy a Rolex for that purpose. But what we want is, we get most excited with customers that say, hey, I kayaked down the Grand Canyon with my Vaer, or I, went on this 3-month trip through Southeast Asia so that's the one. We want that because it's exciting. We think that, if people go through those adventures with our watch or with any product, it's going to bring them closer to that product. And it's also good, just going to show off what it can do. So again, like, and also it's another way like Ryan was just mentioning, the 30 ATM versus 20 ATM. So what we'll say with the diver is like, we encourage, actually, maybe we don't want to encourage them to try to take it below 20, like, because that could be dangerous, but it's just kind of, it pokes at that ridiculousness of the 1,000 or 100 ATM or whatever it is. Just put it to the test. And you'll also notice that, there's a lot of 10 ATM watch brands that never show a guy in the water with a watch, or
Right.
or Ryan was pointing out, I think maybe a Timex diver 10 ATM, but it's sold on a leather strap. It's like, what, you don't want to take the leather in the salt water? Like, the whole thing is kind of bizarre. So there's just like a little bit of unpacking of it. I actually just listened to the podcast. We were mentioning, I think, the pilot watch with the chrome on the numeral. Like, it's examples of that where it's like, what are they thinking, sort of thing. So that's kind of, that's why we do that water.
Yeah.
That is just Reagan brought that up. That's a huge pet peeve of mine, is brands selling water-oriented watches. A guy like waist deep in the water, and it comes on a leather strap and doesn't come with a strap made for water usage. It's just, it's absurd, because it's absolutely not intended for that purpose, and yet you're still explicitly marketing it for that. And so, as you guys know, and some of the listeners, all of our watches are with 2 straps. So we sell a ton of our watches on a leather strap, but every single watch comes with an quote unquote ocean ready strap. So either nylon or silicone.
Function first. Yes. This is a tool, and you start there, and then we can talk about variations of dials and things like that, and how, what straps you want to put it on. But check those early boxes. Very cool.
Yeah, because it comes down to, we want the people to have this watch for 5 years. And what, if you work backwards and say, what is the biggest impediment for them having a watch for 5 years or 10 years? What if you set it down, you go into the shower and then steam floods it? Or what if, you're at a birthday party and you come and pushes you in the pool? Those are the things those are like the random life events that are going to ruin your watch. And let's cover those bases first. Yeah. Again, scratching would be the next thing. Let's make sure every watch has sapphire. So screwed on crown, 10 ATM, those are just the givens, because we want to get to that 5-year, 10-year lifespan, because that's what we think, people really want. And then from there, let's figure out the designs and everything else. But it really starts with those key components of durability.
Recording this podcast still with our stay-at-home orders, unfortunately. But one of the things that I've always found interesting about your brand in particular is that it's become quite synonymous with brands at the moment, where they're rightly supporting medical workers, first responders, and things like that. But this is something that you guys have always done. I remember you did that special drive when there was fires, for the firefighters there, and you offer a discount to not just military, but first responders, etc. So what I like about it is you don't make a big kind of song and dance about it. It's something that it obviously means a lot to you. So how did that come about?
We've been a 1% for the Planet member for years now, I guess. I mean, part of starting the business, when we started the business, not to sound cheesy, but it's nice to be able to help others. And as the business grows, we'll have more resources to be able to help others as well. But so 1% for the Planet's been part of the ethos. And of course, it helps with marketing as well. People enjoy that. And with 1% for the Planet, we get to give to organizations that we care about. So we give to ocean-oriented organizations, Surfrider. We give to a rivers organization called Freshwater Trust, and mountains organization. And so that's always been incredible. The fire, when you reference it, there were pretty bad brush fires, I guess a year or 2 ago now, that impacted our local communities pretty heavily. And so immediately we ran a campaign that donated profits to those. And most recently with COVID, obviously there's people on the front lines, and everyone, it's cool to see a sense of community in all of our communities. People are sewing masks, people are donating time and energy, and giving love to first responders, and basically the people who we're fortunate to get to work remote and work from home. There's a lot of people who aren't, and people who are working and putting themselves at risk. Reagan and I thought it would be really great to figure a way to, I don't know, get watches on those people's wrists. So we went back and forth with the structure of the campaign, and ended up just saying, we can do 50% off for the first 30 first responders, or people who nominate first responders. And we got an insane response relative to the size of our brand. We got over 100 either doctors, firefighters, EMTs, or people related to those people laying their hearts out and telling their stories. And So that in itself was cool. You know, Reagan and I were just sitting there reading people's stories. The fact that we could get wristwatches to them and have them using, you know, we've gotten pictures back, which we need to share as well, from doctors and nurses wearing our watches with all their, you know, protective gear in the hospital. So that's truly incredible.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the chat, is like we see ourselves, even though we're an online business, we're, you know, kind of remote, we don't really see our customers on a day-to-day, we still see ourselves like kind of like a main street ethos. It's a good mindset to be in, is like, think of your customer as your neighbor. Like if you're, you know, you wouldn't, if you're like selling to the guy who lives next, like right beside you, you're not going to like give him a watch that's going to fall apart in 20 days or when you fall in the water. It's just, it's that type of exploitative mentality that really, since the American watch industry collapsed in the 70s, unfortunately, much of the watch industry and much of many industries have been dominated by the wrong type of thinking, and really profit-centered thinking and short-termism and big exits and all of this other stuff. And that's good for a few people who are, you know, making the most profit, but it's really bad for the vast majority of people who are the customers. And so we're a small part of what we think is a reversing of trend towards, you know, a slightly more compassion, but just generally more thoughtfulness about the products we're making.
That was really fascinating. Thanks for joining Kris and I on this podcast. If you've got any questions, join us over on the Facebook group, Casual Watch Talk. As always, we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.